I just want to do another quick sponsor little thing. It's actually for our stuff, those of us who are running the conference. So I just want to mention these items. They're all Laravel community, built by the Laravel community for the Laravel community. So I just want to take a shout out to each of these. Obviously, Taylor and Forge. If you need to manage PHP servers, which I think some of you might, then you just need to use Forge. That's it. I mean, there's nothing else even to say. If you're not using it, I don't know why you're not using it. We use it for dozens of servers. Fantastic. Makes managing servers so much easier. Just all the stuff you never ever want to deal with. It does all that bad stuff. So, and it's also ridiculously cheap. So check it out. It directly helps Taylor make Laravel better. So just use Forge. Recommend it to your friends. So Laravel News, Eric Barnes' project, the official Laravel blog. It's where to find what's going on in Laravel at any moment. That's all right there. Oh, wait a minute. Okay. Hold on. Okay. Well, my sound was not working, but it looks like it's all right. Okay. So check out Laravel News. All the release notes, everything for 5.6 is going to be up there. It's just every day there's new amazing stuff up there, so definitely check that out. And then finally, Lara Talent is a new project I've been working on. It's sort of a sister site to Lara Jobs. So if you're looking for a new job or if you're hiring, check out Lara Talent. It's kind of an all new way to hire. It's sort of an experiment of sorts where it's kind of a reverse job board that features the developer, and employers can then sort of contact the developer rather than the other way around, as most job boards work. So something new and kind of unique in the job world. So give that a shot. Okay. Getting ahead of ourselves here. All right. I'm going to bring on Taylor. There he is. Hello, sir. Got to unmute. There we go.
Can you hear me? Test.
There you go. All right, good. All right, and I'm going to let him take it away.
All righty. Let me share my screen here. All right. I'll just assume this is working perfectly.
It's working. You're good.
All right. So, hey, everybody out there. I am here sitting in my office talking to thousands of people, which is kind of weird. But hope you're enjoying the conference so far. And, thanks to Ian and all the sponsors for putting it together. So my talk was kind of a recap of what's been going on in Laravel, and particularly with Laravel 5.6 and Spark 6.0. Laravel 5.6 is officially released now. If you have not noticed this morning, it did come out. So if you go to the documentation, you'll see that 5.6 is now the default version, and you can get to the upgrade guide as well as the release notes here in the documentation. And if you do, Laravel new app name or whatever in your command line, you will get a brand new Laravel 5.6 application. So all of that is released and now available, and we'll release Lumen 5.6 probably in the next week or so as well to complement Laravel 5.6. And I'll talk a little bit more about Spark later. This release is kind of a smaller release, I would say, than previous releases. It still has some great features that I'm really glad we have in there, but I've actually been spending a lot of my time working on a fresh new package, a really refined package, kind of like Horizon was, that I hope to talk more about this summer. So, this release is more of a maintenance release and improves some kind of convenience things, as well as I think the framework itself is getting more stable and more mature. So there's just sort of less groundbreaking stuff to really introduce this release cycle, which is kind of nice in a way because the upgrade time is just a few minutes. Really, I think I have it listed on the website as something like 5 to 10 minutes, 5 to 15 minutes or something like that. So most of you will be able to upgrade your apps extremely quickly, and most likely won't have to make any changes at all, really, besides adding a new configuration file for the new logging features, which we'll talk about here in a second. See my notes here. Yeah, so I guess we'll jump in and just kind of run through some of these features. A lot of these are community contributed, so thanks to all the community members that sent pull requests for these features. And if you're thinking about getting involved in open source, please jump in and help out. If you have a feature idea, you can run it by us on either Laravel internals, or you can make the pull request directly, or you can even tweeting me feature ideas is fine. I'm on Twitter at Taylor Otwell. So that's a good way to just sort of run ideas by me. Or you can email me at taylor@laravel.com. But there's also other ways to get involved if you not comfortable contributing code, or maybe you just don't have an idea right now of something to contribute. You can also contribute to the documentation that's at github.com/laravel/docs. And it's all written in Markdown. It's very easy to modify and work with. And there's a branch for each version of the documentation. So you can just update whatever branch you're interested in and send a pull request that way. So there's lots of ways to get involved. Writing blog posts or doing videos are always really great because it just spreads more educational material about the framework, which I think is really one of the framework's strong points, is just the immense amount of material that's out there to learn how to use it, both in the documentation and on Laracast, of course, and Laravel News and all the various blog posts that people write. All right, so let's jump into this a little bit. We'll just kind of work through this routes file and look at some of these new features.
Taylor?
First, yeah.
Oh,
yep.
One second. There's some requests to maybe make the font size a little bit bigger, as you've probably heard.
Alrighty. How's that look?
Yeah, maybe go one more, because some people are on small screens. Yeah, there you go.
All right, let me make this window a little bigger here.
Thanks.
All right. So first things first, the most important things, this color scheme is inspired GitHub, which you can install on the command palette on Sublime Text. This font is Operator Mono, which you can purchase online. It does cost money, but you do get these nice comment cursive looking things. So this first route, first we're going to talk about some of the new logging stuff. And I don't know how many of you have ever customized logging in Laravel 5.5 and previous versions of Laravel, but it was really not very pretty, and it really looked something like this. I think you had to come into this bootstrap/app file, which you would basically never come into for any other reason. And down here at the bottom, you had to do something like this, where you do configure monologue using and pass it a closure, which receives a monologue instance. And then you could just like modify this or whatever the methods are. I don't really know, but you could modify that monologue instance right here in this closure. And it feels sort of hacked on compared to the rest of the framework and the way you would customize other things like caching or session or other aspects of the framework. This felt very like it hadn't been thought through, as clearly as the other parts. We just sort of punted and gave you this closure to do whatever you want to do with, which is kind of nice sometimes. But in this case, there's certain situations that were really inconvenient to set up in previous versions of Laravel. So in Laravel 5.5, there's actually kind of a rewritten logging configuration system. And this is contributed by Leo, who I call him Froggy because that's his Twitter handle. And he kind of kickstarted this whole push to improve the logging stuff and sent the initial PR to get this stuff in place. So what it looks like in 5.6 is there's actually a new config logging file, which is kind of convenient because all your logging stuff is now in this kind of dedicated file, whereas it used to be there was a couple options in the app configuration file and kind of spread out a little bit. But now it looks a lot like your caching or database or session configuration file, in the sense that we have a default log channel, which is going to be, whenever you call log : info or whatever, this is going to be the channel that's used, sort of like the default channel is always used when you do cache put or something like that. So, and then you configure your channels down here, and similar to cache or database, you can have multiple channels configured for the same application. So, I have a few here that we can look at. Sort of the default logging style that people are used to is this quote single channel, which is just sort of a single log file in log/laravel.log, and basically logs everything, because this level configuration option means I want you to log everything that's a debug level or above. And I think there's 7 or 8 logging levels defined by some official RFC that Monolog, the underlying library, adheres to. And then, of course, there's also the daily log channel, which logs to a new log file each day. So it's kind of rotating and keeps a maximum of 7 days worth of logs. And all of this is a lot more easy to configure now in Laravel 5.6, since it's all sort of right here in this configuration file. And even changing the amount of logging days was not super obvious in the default installation of Laravel 5.5. And then we have Slack, which is a new sort of out-of-the-box supported log channel in Laravel 5.6, in which Slack was actually always available under the hood in Monolog, since they have a built-in Slack handler, but we just weren't exposing great configuration for it. So now you have a really easy way to just plug in your Slack webhook URL, the username, and if you want an emoji or something to show as the avatar for the user, and then what level you want it to log. So in most cases, you're probably only sending pretty serious errors to Slack. You're not sending debug information or just kind of general info. So I have that set to critical or above by default, but you can change that, as you want. And then, of course, we have the syslog and error log channels, which send to the system log and error log, and which are really, I find myself using the syslog channel when I'm pairing up with something like Papertrail app, which is a sort of a logging as a service app that lets you search and display your logs really nicely. So check that out. You can install that via Forge, but that's when I find myself most using that. It's in production. All right, so let's kind of play with this a little bit, and I'll show you what it looks like. The stack, well, first let's just look at the basic log call. So of course, on route/log, we're just going to get kind of the basic, log written to our logging file. So if I call that route and look, we get the basic log stuff. Now on the stack thing, this is a new concept in the logging setup. A stack channel is kind of a virtual channel of sorts that just aggregates a list of other channels. So what it lets you do is sort of build out all these channels individually, and then you can build stacks out of them. And so that when you call log info, you can actually be sending to multiple channels at once. So the default channel right here is just single, but I can actually add more stuff to this. So like if I change this to, let's say, single and daily, and now we call this this same route, now since my stack driver is my default channel, it's actually going to log to both single and daily. So if you look over here on my logs directory, when I call this route, we should see a new daily file pop up. And you see we got an entry for the single file, and it wrote to the daily file as well. So what this would actually look like in production is you would have more of a production stack that probably is something like single and Slack. And, so that when I write to this stack of logging stuff, and let's just make this my default stack actually. So when I write to the production stack, it's going to write to the single channel, which is just our basic log file, and it's going to write to Slack channel. Now remember, we configured our Slack channel to only log things that were critical or above. So it's not going to log debug information to Slack. And let's take a look at that. So we changed that to our default stack. So I'm just going to get rid of this. We don't really need this if it's our default stack. So when I call this production route, it's going to call a log info. This is not, critical or above. It's just going to log some debug information and pass some sort of data that we might want in our log file. This is called our context data. And then it's going to make another call to log critical. That's, a serious error, like the system is down. So what we should see when we hit this route is we want to see the debug information logged to the log file. And we shouldn't see the debug information go to Slack, but we should see the system is down go to Slack as well as our log file. So let's hit this and see what happens if I haven't screwed anything up here. All right, so if we check our log file, we see both the debug information and the critical system is down error. And if I go to Slack here, you can see I got a message here that I've already configured my webhook URL. And we got the system is down at a critical level error, and we got that context information. So it's really easy to configure sort of a basic production logging setup where you're sending debug information to your log files, critical errors to Slack. You can do it really quickly in just a few minutes using the configuration file and sort of build these stacks however you want. So maybe you have, 3 or 4 channels in this stack, and they're all sending to different things, and it's very easy to configure. Whereas before to do this, you would basically need to use that, app configure monologue using closure and push a bunch of handlers and configure the settings all manually and stuff like that. But now it's just a whole lot easier. So backing up to this real quick, this log stack method lets you build a stack on the fly. So if you have sort of a unique situation that you want to log to a few different channels, but you don't really have a dedicated stack configuration for it, you can just create one on the fly using log stack and just pass the channels that you're wanting to log to, and it will just sort of work on the fly like that. So let me clear out these log files. And you can see here I'm just getting a single and a daily stack on the fly and just logging some information to it. And if I hit that route, we should get log information in both files, which we do. So that's just an option. If you don't have a stack configured, you can just build one on the fly using that method. All right, so moving on a little bit, I want to show you a little bit about customization. There's 2 sort of custom approaches to logging. You can use this feature called log taps, which it works kind of similar to the tap helper in Laravel. So say I would use tap in a situation where there's an existing log driver that's basically what does what I want to do, but I just want to configure some minor option, like maybe you could set the formatter on monologue or something like that. And so what it looks like is in your configuration file, you configure your driver like normal. So for example, I've named the channel tap, but it's using the single log file driver, give it, the path to the file. And then in my tap option, I just specify an array of classes that should be called to customize this monologue instance. And the monologue instance will be passed into the invoke method of those classes. And these are basically, the only reason these aren't closures is because we can't serialize a closure to cache our configuration files. Otherwise, these would just be closures. So just think of these as basically functions that are customizing monologue. And in here, you can do whatever you want with the monologue instance and customize it however you like. So you don't have to do it all in that Bootstrap app file. You can do it in its own kind of dedicated class that you can actually maybe test and stuff like that a little easier. All right, so if I call this route, we're just going to log something to this. And since we're catching it in the tap and just dumping out the monologue, I just want to show how that's catching the monologue instance. So if we call tap here, you can see our tap class was called, and we just kind of dump out this monologue instance here. All right, so that's how you would kind of customize an existing channel. If you want to create sort of your own monologue instance from scratch, that's also very easy to do and works kind of similarly to tapping. So if I look at my configuration file, To do this, all I say is that I want a custom driver, and then I just give it a class using this via method, and it's just going to create a monologue instance via this class. So in this class, we can do whatever we want. We can just create a new monologue instance and pass it in, and we can have full control over the creation of this monologue instance. So this is really the most, extreme flexibility for building it out however you want it to be. So this custom route is just going to, log something to this custom channel, and we'll just dump out the monologue instance afterwards. All right, so that's basically all there is to it for building a custom monologue instance. It's pretty simple, but I think the main benefit of the new logging setup is that everything's just much more convenient in this logging file. It's much easier to stack multiple handlers into stacks and log stuff to different places. Much easier than it was before. So hopefully you'll enjoy that, and that will make your life a little easier, and you won't have to, fiddle around with stuff in the Bootstrap app file anymore when you need to log. All right. Let me close some of this stuff, and we'll look at a few other things here. Single task server scheduling is a really cool new feature in Laravel 5.6 that I've actually wanted and sort of hacked around in various ways for a while, but this was contributed by Lawrence, who built understand.io. It's just kind of a Laravel monitoring platform. And I've got his Twitter here in the file. But the situation you would want to use this in is if you have multiple worker servers that are all running the artisan schedule run artisan command, so they're all running cron jobs, and a lot of times you have cron jobs that should be run on every server. So maybe they clean up files, purging log files or something, or doing some other task that needs to be run, on each server because they're by nature server specific. But I find a lot of times I also have cron jobs that really need to run once. And it doesn't really matter what server they're run on. They just need to run once, sort of per cron expression. So this would be something maybe you generate a report and email it to somebody. If you have multiple worker servers that are all running your scheduled task, it's going to generate, on each server an email on each server. So the person's going to get 3 to 4 emails if you have 3 or 4 worker servers. Now there's a really easy way in Laravel 5.6 to say, I want this scheduled task to just run on one server, and I don't really care where it runs as long as it only runs once. All right, so to show you what this looks like, I've got this little dummy artisan command out here called artisan sleep. It just sleeps for 10 seconds. And in my console kernel, getting something to run on one server is really just as simple as saying on one server when you define the scheduled task. So in this example, I'm doing schedule command sleep, and since I'm not specifying a frequency, that means it's going to run every minute. But of course, we could specify it needs to run hourly or daily or monthly or whatever we want to do, and then we just chain on that on one server thing. Now, one caveat about this feature is you do need to be using either Redis or Memcached as your cache server, sort of as a central cache server, to use this feature, and that's just because those cache drivers really have the features for atomic locks that we need to be able to secure locks really easily without worrying about race conditions or anything like that in sort of a central way. So if you're using one of those cache drivers, you can benefit from this feature. So what it kind of looks like is, let me open 2 terminals here. And let me make this font a little bigger. All right. So if we run artisan schedule run here, it starts running that command. And if we come over here and try to run it, you can see that it's going to skip this command, and it tells us it's already run on another server. So I can't actually run this. Well, it just timed out. So I can, run this on one server at a time here. And you see on this one, it skips because it's already run on the other server now. So this is a really, convenient feature, I think, for if you're running on multiple servers, that makes it much easier to sort of work around the situation. Because before, what I've, kind of been forced to do is before I had this feature, is having this, when callback that this allows you to specify sort of a true or false condition on whether it should run. And in the past, I've had to do like, is, master worker server or something like that. And that was always felt kind of hacky because you had to have this environment variable on one server that indicates that it's the server that should run this command and stuff like that. So I find this is, much better. So I'm very thankful for this contribution from Lawrence, because I've personally wanted this myself quite a bit over the years, actually. All right, so that's how on one server scheduled task work. Okay, so moving down through the file, dynamic rate limiting, also a new feature in Laravel. So I actually realized when I was working on Laravel 5.6 that the rate limiting feature of Laravel was actually not documented at all, even though it's been there for a little while. So that's now documented if you haven't seen it before. But there actually is a rate limiting middleware included in Laravel that by default is assigned the key throttle. So in this example, we're throttling, we're saying that you can make 2 requests per 1 minute is basically what this is saying. So not a very high rate limit here. And let's go to our application. I'll kind of show you how this works. Let me register so we have an account here. All right, and just testing this route, if we hit this throttle route, access granted 1, 2, and now we get too many requests. So we were booted out after 2 requests, kind of like we would expect. All right, and I'm going to clear my cache to try to clear that lockout. But now in 5.6, before 5.6, you couldn't really customize this value. It was sort of hard-coded right in the middleware definition. But I found a lot of times that, the rate limit you want to base on the user's account directly. So because a lot of times users have different rate limits, based on they're paying you more or they're more trustworthy or something that sort of graduated to a higher rate limit. So what you can do now is instead of hard coding this first value, you can just give it an attribute, and that will be assumed to be an attribute on the user model. So it could be a mutator that's accessing some more complicated thing, or it could be just sort of a column directly. But if we look at my database table, and I know this is pretty small, I don't know if it's super easy to make bigger, but this has a rate limit of 10 right here on this user record in the rate underscore limit column. So if I hit this route, it should be respecting that value for my rate limit. So let's hit this user throttle route and see what happens here. Get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 requests, and then 2 mini requests. So this lets you be more dynamic in how you're specifying your rate limit. Of course, if there's no user logged in, this will just kind of fall through and won't use that as the value. But if the user is logged in, you can have a dynamic rate limit there, and it makes it a little easier and quicker to customize that and make it unique per the user. All right, so that's dynamic rate limiting. Storage download is a new feature contributed by Jonathan Rennick. And it's a really cool new feature that I'm surprised wasn't in there before, because it seems pretty obvious now in hindsight. But if you have a file stored using the storage facility in Laravel, which is powered by Fly System, you can now easily download those files and sort of force a file download in the user's browser. So in this example, in storage/app, I have this little foo.txt file that just says hello world. And if we want to download this, we can just say return storage download and then give it the path to the file. And again, this happens to be on my local system, for this demo, but it could be on S3 or anywhere else that's supported by Fly System. And so when I call this route download, you can see we get a download here in my browser, and we can open that up, and there's our hello world file. Now you can also pass a custom file name to this method. If you want it to have a custom file name, and you can also pass headers here, an array of headers as the third argument if you need to. So if I move this up and then hit request download, You can see we get that custom file name there, so you can name it whatever you want when it's downloaded. So just a sort of a convenience method for quickly downloading those files in the browser. Most of the time you're probably going to be using this with PDFs or maybe Excel spreadsheets or something like that you want to let the user download. So a really new, nice, convenient way to do that. So thanks to Jonathan for that contribution. Channel classes. This was also a community contribution. I've got Tony's GitHub name here. So I'm actually going to switch to another branch to show this. It's a little more involved. Laracon channels. Make sure this is all installed. All right, so I don't know if you've used Laravel's event broadcasting before. It's one of my favorite features. So if you haven't used it before, definitely play with it and get just a test pusher account, a free pusher account, and play with it a little bit, because it's a really powerful feature that's, I think, really unique to Laravel in terms of backend frameworks in almost any language, in terms of the way it's sort of baked in and integrated really nicely. So previously with event broadcasting, when you're broadcasting on a private channel, you had to define these callbacks in your route/channels file. And basically what these did is when someone tries to subscribe to a broadcasting channel, this callback gets called and you either return true or false. And that indicates whether the user is authenticated to listen on that channel. So, in reality, we're probably going to be checking, does the invoice user ID match the user ID of the user that's trying to authenticate? That would be what you're typically going to do in one of these callbacks. In this case, I'm just going to return true all the time since we're just demoing this. But how it works is, let's go in here. I'm going to need to migrate my database because I have a new table here. Let me re-register here so we get the right data. Oh, I must have had a seed that did this already for me. That's convenient. All right. So we have this dummy view, and I'm going to pull up the console here. And I have a route in my route/web file that when we hit this broadcast route, it's going to dispatch this event, this invoice paid event. And I already have an invoice seeded in the database, I believe. So we will dispatch that event. And if we look at that event, it is marked as should broadcast. So that's what determines, which events are going to be broadcast. And since invoice is a public property of this event, that's also going to be serialized down with the event. So let me check my database here and make sure we have an invoice, and there is one. So if I hit this broadcast route, I'm going to open this up in another browser. Laravel.test/broadcast. You can see right here, here we go. You can see we get an event there in the console. Laravel Echo, I just have it dumping out that event where we get the ID and the attributes from that invoice. All right, so that's kind of how event broadcasting works. If you haven't seen it, you can broadcast events in real time to your front end. Now, in Laravel 5.6, you don't have to organize all your callbacks right here in the channel file. You can actually have a channel class, sort of like a controller, which is sort of convenient if you have a lot of private channels that you're not sort of bulking up this file. It lets you have a more organization over the whole thing. And so what it looks like is you just call broadcast channel, and similarly to if you were routing to a controller, you just specify that a class should be used for this channel, which I have an invoice channel here defined. And these live in the app/broadcasting directory, and there is a new artisan make channel command to generate these channels. But really, it's a really simple class. It just has a join method, and it receives the user and the invoice, just like the callback, and just like the callback should return a Boolean true or false to indicate whether we should be allowed to join this channel. So I've commented out our callback and uncommented our broadcast channel. So let's just refresh the page and make sure this works. Should work the exact same way, where if we broadcast things, now we're getting it on the front end, except we're using that channel class for authentication now instead of the callback. And again, This is a class we could new up and test, very easily in a PHP unit test just by creating a new instance of the class and passing in a dummy user and a dummy model and making sure that it returns true or false based on, the state of those models. All right, so that is channel classes, just a convenient organization method there. Let me switch back to our original branch here that we were on. Let's see, switch back to Laracon Online. All right, let's jump back into this file. All right, so coming down a little further, API controller generation. So in Laravel 5.5, this feature already existed actually, where you could call route API resource as opposed to route resource. And the difference between the two is only that the API resource method will not create will not define a route for the create method and the edit method, which are, those are more UI based. The create method normally would show the form for creating a new resource, whereas the edit method would show an update form for the resource. Since those things are not really necessary on an API resource, this method is a convenience mechanism for excluding those routes from the resource definition. And to sort of complement that, there was a contribution to 5.6 to let you easily create an API resource controller. So I'm going to open my controller directory here. And how it works is really simple. We just do artisan make controller. Let's call it flight controller. And add this API flag, and it creates the controller. And if we look at this controller, you can see we have index, store, show, update, and destroy, but we do not have a create or an edit method. Since this is an API controller, those methods were excluded. So just a nice, convenient way to generate those types of controllers. If you're building APIs, you no longer have to manually go in and sort of remove those methods that you didn't need all the time. All right, so thanks for that contribution. Eloquent date casting was something that was implemented by Mohammed, Laravel's full-time employee. And it's a really cool new feature as well, where previously, if you had an Eloquent model, all your dates were sort of serialized down to your front end in basically the same way. But now it's very easy to customize the date format for your dates. So let's see, if I go into this project model, you can see I just have my cast as I have this last seen at column, which is sort of the last time the user looked at this project, and we're casting it as a date time. So let's just hit this route and kind of see what happens. And all this is really going to do is just create a new project using our model factory and just return it straight from the route so that we get some JSON to look at. And you can see here that we get back last seen at in just the standard year, month, day, hours, minutes, seconds format, just like we get created at and updated at. But we can go into this and customize it a little bit. So we might say, maybe we want the year, the month, the day, and just the hours and minutes or something like that. And you specify it using this, using a colon. And you can see now that date format changes in our serialized format. We could change it to just, year, month, day. If you have a column that's just like a birthday or something like that, where it's not really time related, you can easily customize that right on your cast by just specifying the format right there in the cast declaration. And this works for both date and date time columns. So you can specify it on either one. Just an easy way to customize that serialization without writing, mutators or doing a bunch of other garbage that you don't want to do. All right. So that is custom date formatting on Eloquent models. Argon hashing is another contribution. Thanks again for this contribution. And Argon hashing is a new feature in PHP 7.2. So Laravel 5.6 doesn't require 7.2. It actually requires 7.1.3. But if you're using Laravel 5.6 on PHP 7.2, you can use this new hashing driver as an alternative to bcrypt. And they're both pretty secure, but they have sort of different features and different customization options. So really what it looks like to generate an Argon hash One, you can just call the driver directly like this using hash driver Argon. But there's also a hashing configuration file where you can configure, the default hashing driver that you want. All right, so when I hit this Argon route, we'll just get a fresh Argon hash. And it has, like I said, other configuration options, whereas bcrypt basically has one main configuration option, which is we call it rounds, that increases the amount of time it takes to calculate a hash. So because with hash functions, you actually want them to be slower, or you actually want them to be slow in general, because it's harder to sort of create rainbow tables out of slow hash algorithms and stuff like that. It's hard to brute force, a slow hash word password algorithm. So with the Argon driver, you can control the threads, the memory, and the time. And these all control various aspects of how long it takes to make an Argon hash. So when I use this example, and I've kind of bumped up the default values, you can see it will actually spin for a little while, generating that hash every time here, because I've bumped up the work factor to make it take longer. So you can adjust that based on, your own comfortability levels, I guess, with how long you want your hashes to take. So check that out if you're on PHP 7.2. It integrates really well with Laravel, and if your application requires this kind of thing, you can start using it. All right, collision is a new default development dependency in Laravel. So in a default Laravel 5.6 installation, it is listed right here under the required dev. So it's not something that will be installed in production, but as you're developing, this is installed by default. And what it is I have an artisan command that throws an exception so that we can take a look at this. But you get really nice exception information on the console now. And it feels kind of similar to whoops on the web version, where you get a little snippet of the code where something went wrong, and you get sort of a more pretty formatted stack trace. So this is now included by default. So if you see an exception on your artisan commands, you're going to get a much prettier output, at least in your development environment, than you were before, where you get a little snippet of code and some cleaner output. So thanks for that package, and was really easy for us to just pull it in and start using it, and I think really improves the console experience quite a bit around exception handling. All right, and finally, before we move on to some Spark stuff, the whole authentication scaffolding, which many of you are probably familiar with. When you first start a Laravel project, you can run make auth, and you get these registration and login pages and forgot password and stuff to sort of quickly generate out the user scaffolding. These are all upgraded to Bootstrap 4, as well as the pagination aspects of the framework, which is the pagination links. What did I call it? Bootstrap, I guess. These are all updated Bootstrap 4 by default as well. If you're upgrading an application from Laravel 5.5, it's really easy to continue using Bootstrap 3. You would basically just say paginator uses Bootstrap 3 in your app service provider, and that would become your default pagination link style. But otherwise, everything is upgraded to Bootstrap 4, which released recently after many years of development. So it's good to have that all upgraded, and all of that sort of on the latest and greatest stuff there. All right. So I'm going to quickly move on to Spark, because I'm running a little bit long here, actually. So I'm going to jump into the Spark directory, open up the Spark code. And now Spark 6 was led by Mohammed. So he has led the development of Spark 6, and it's the first major upgrade for Spark that we've had since it was initially released a couple of years ago now. And I'm really excited about all the improvements that are here in Spark 6. So I'll just walk through them as quickly as I can and show them to you now. So the idea behind Spark is it scaffolds out all the subscription billing and invoices and, password reset and stuff like that you would need to build when you're going to build a software as a service product, which is a monthly subscription product. Like Forge or Envoyer. And I built Spark after Forge and Envoyer just based on all the headache I had, writing all that stuff for Forge and Envoyer, mainly repeating it on Envoyer. And I wanted a quick way to scaffold out projects that, I wouldn't get bogged down and overwhelmed by that stuff right out of the gate, because a lot of times I would start working on something and it would kind of overwhelm me, all the billing stuff I'm going to have to redo, and it would just sort of kill the whole excitement of starting a new project. And I wanted to get rid of that. So Spark does that for you. So Spark 6.0, we're going to be launching an entirely redesigned website for it, and entirely I've read through all the documentation and updated it all for you. So it's going to be a fresh experience, but I'll show you some of the new features here. So let's go ahead and let me migrate this database. Let's go ahead and register an account. And the entire UI has actually been redesigned and refreshed by Steve Sugar, who just gave the last talk. So if I actually have an old Spark installation here, and you can kind of compare the old UI and the new UI. The new UI is on the left. It's a little bit more clean and modern. The old UI looks, like pretty default Bootstrap, which it was. And so we'll kind of look at more differences as we go there, but the whole thing has been refreshed. All right, so if I log in here, make an account. All right, now I'm on the application dashboard. And again, I'll just go ahead and leave this old Spark up here so we can look at it. Let me make an account here. I already have made an account. All right, and you can see here there's some differences here. The announcements bell is a little bit refreshed and improved compared to the old one. Of course, the dashboard is a little, has the new panel style. If we jump into the settings, you can see that Spark 6 here on the left has a new sidebar with new icons that have been designed by Steve, and then also updated panels as well. So it's just a cleaner look overall. Looks a little bit more modern, a little bit more fresh, and something you would feels more presentable out of the box, something you could actually ship and, not be slightly embarrassed about or felt just sort of cookie cutter. The subscription things or the subscription page is improved here and refreshed. And also want to show you the kiosk, which is a feature in Spark that lets you make announcements to your users, look at some basic user metrics, look at your existing users. And this has also been refreshed. So if we go to the metrics, there's a refresh and a facelift here on the metrics page with new icons and typography and stuff. And then, it just looks better overall. So it's a general refresh. Shout out to Steve for making this look a little cleaner out of the box and improving things for us. And of course, this is all also on Bootstrap 4, just like Laravel 5.6. So it's upgraded to the latest and greatest Bootstrap here. All right, so looking at this demo, one of the first major features is that Spark is now totally localizable. So in previous versions of Spark, you were really locked into just your whole app. All the settings pages, at least, were all in English, and it was very difficult, if not impossible, basically, to translate that to another language. So this is all fully localizable now. So I'm going to switch to my checkout localization branch, and this has all been localized into Arabic by Mohammed, but you can see the entire interface is now translatable to whatever language you want, and I'm sure many languages will be popping up soon after release. And we also have support for right to left layouts. Some languages read right to left instead of left to right, and so we can easily swap the entire text layout of Spark with one line of code, which was just Spark use right to left theme. So much more localizable, much more international friendly in Spark 6.0. So hopefully that is good for Laravel's global audience, which it has a very global audience now. Since we're here at Laracon Online, that's kind of relevant. All right, so switching back to my master branch, I'll just get rid of that change. Let's see. The main things I want to cover here are billing improvements next. In previous versions of Spark, your billing was basically like this, where you just had a basic billing plan, either $10 a month or $20 a month that you charged to either users or teams, and that was kind of it. And one of the most requested features in Spark has been per seat billing, where you can charge maybe a team, you can charge per member, sort of like Slack, where you can charge $8 a user, $10 a user for the team. And that's now extremely easy to do in Spark. So let me show you that. And I'm going to go to this per team member branch to show you this. I'm going to migrate this database. And let me make a new account here with a team, since this is a team-based setup. And you can see when I'm registering, it asks me for a team name. All right, so now we're in here, and if we go to this settings page, let's look at the Spark service provider actually first. To set up this charge team per member billing, all we're basically going to do is say Spark charge teams per member, and that's going to do everything necessary to take care of when a team adds a member. We're going to increment their subscription on Stripe. When they remove a member, we're going to decrement their subscription on Stripe. And that's all going to be done automatically. And then we define our plans that we want to have. So in this case, I have a $10 a user plan and a $20 a user plan. And so now in our dashboard, you can see on our subscribe page, we actually see that noted here, where we see that our basic plan is $10 per member per month, and the pro plan is $20 per member per month for this team. So I can sign up for this plan, and this is using the new Stripe Elements JavaScript stuff where it's rendering in an iframe. Subscribe to that plan. And now we're subscribed there, and I have a dummy route out here that I can show you. Where am I? Am I in the right place? Per team member, route/web. Well, but if I add a team member to this team, Mohammed.at.laravel.com, I have that writing to my log file. We'll just grab that invite link. And we're going to sign up as Mohammed. He's been invited to this team. All right, he's registering. And now we can see he is a member of our team here. That's going to automatically increment that subscription out on Stripe. And if we remove him, it's going to decrement that subscription as well. So very easy to get started with per member billing. All right, now there are situations where you want to charge, on some custom value. For instance, I'm building a project management software and I want to charge users per project. So this is stuff that varies on the project you're actually building. We've also made this very easy to do in Spark 6.0, and it's another often requested feature for the package. So let me switch to another branch here called per custom. And I'm going to migrate my database, and let's go ahead and make a fresh account here. It doesn't allow that blew my existing session right out from under it. So let me refresh the page there and register. All right, so let's take a look at my Spark service provider now. So if I take a look at this, you can see now I have Spark charge per seat, and I can specify what exactly I'm charging for, which in this case is a project, since we're pretending we have a project management application. And then I pass it a callback, which receives the current user, and I return the current count of whatever we're charging for. So the project count in this example. And so now what happens is when I come here to subscribe, you can see that it is noted here, whatever we specify, $10 per project per month. And we can subscribe. All right, so we will subscribe to that. And now since Spark doesn't have any way of knowing when you create or remove a new project by default, what it looks like is in my routes file, whenever I add a new project, which I'm doing here in this increment thing just to save time. So we'll add a new project to the current user just using our model factory. We just need to say add or auth user add seat. In the same way, when we remove a project, say when we delete a project, we can just call auth user remove seat, and that will either increment or decrement the current Stripe subscription quantity for you. So, if I hit Spark test /increment, that increments and adds that seat. And if I call decrement, we're just going to call remove seat to decrease that quantity in Stripe. So really easy to build these types of billing systems that would otherwise take you probably a solid week to flesh out and build with the UI and everything. So Spark 6.0 is just intended to make these common situations a lot easier, make Spark fully localizable, upgrade it to Bootstrap 4, use Stripe elements, refresh the user interface, and we'll be releasing Spark 6.0 next week as it is ready to go. And if you've purchased in the last year, you will be upgraded, of course, for free, because we usually upgrade, or users that have purchased recently, get free upgrades. So if you just purchased, last month, you don't have to panic that you have to purchase Spark all over again. You will be included in these new licenses. If you haven't purchased in a long time, you will receive a 50% discount on your Spark 6.0 upgrade. So you still won't have to pay full price. If you've ever purchased Spark before, you'll have half price discount. And if you've never purchased Spark before, you can get in at the normal price and enjoy a lot of these new features. So this will be coming out next week. And, again, thanks to Mohammed for a lot of his work on this, a lot of his work on the localization aspect of it. And special thanks to Steve for his UI enhancements that he made on Spark 6.0. All right. So that's the gist of what I wanted to show you today. I hope that's all exciting and helpful. The Laravel 5.6 improvements and Spark 6.0. Like I said, 5.6 is available today. So this is kind of a release party for Laravel 5.6. And hope you enjoyed it. And of course, if you haven't got your tickets to Laracon US, we'll be announcing more stuff hopefully there. So come out to Chicago in the summer and hang out with some of the same speakers that are speaking here at Laracon Online, and we can all meet in person and hopefully see some cool new stuff there as well. Thanks.
All right, nice job. In honor of you, I've put myself on the Spaceship Enterprise here.
All right. Nice, I love it.
You gotta do something with this green screen.
Oh, yeah.
So we got a couple minutes. I got the chat is so good at answering the questions that like the speakers aren't even having to answer the questions because the chat's answering the questions, which is awesome. But I got a couple for you.
Okay.
One softball, and I'll give you one tricky one. So the softball is the on the Eloquent models, you were showing it with the cast property, but there's also a dates property. Mm-hmm. And just does the dates property work in the same way with the new formatting?
The dates property is really irrelevant now that we have cast. The only reason it still works is because we just never took it away from you. But if you're using the dates property, behind the scenes, I think it's actually just using cast. So you just convert those to cast because it's the exact same functionality. Cast is sort of the next generation of what the dates property used to be. So just start using the cast, and you can just ditch the dates property entirely because it's really not necessary anymore.
Okay, cool. That's good info then. That's not as it's actual info in there, so that's great. All right. This one's more of an opinion, but I guess ultimately the question is essentially like, I guess you can answer for your own apps. What do you do for multi-tenancy? Are you doing it like single schema? Or, obviously there's the various ways to do it. So what's your opinion?
All my apps are just a single database, single, schema. I'm using MySQL. So I just have the typical basic user ID column on a lot of stuff, or project ID or whatever it is. And all my queries are, I pretty much, I find myself writing my queries off of the current user model a lot. So it's sort of already scoped for me. So a lot of times I'll say auth user projects where blah, blah, blah. So I don't ever find myself manually adding tenant keys to queries a lot. So it's never really been a big issue for me. So I haven't used any of the various packages out there for multi-tenancy, but I know that there are a few out there for doing it in various ways, but mine are always pretty cut and dry, single database stuff.
Cool. I've been using this, my little helper function now. So I just have a user function so I can get rid of auth user and it's just user.
Nice.
Cut that one. That's
a true Laravel inspired helper right there.
That should be. I was surprised it wasn't built in. We need a built-in user helper.
Yeah.
All right. Well, awesome talk as always. Thank you, sir.
All right.